I think I'm going to introduce you to the Netherlands and then share some of my first results of my research, and then Mace will introduce his master's research. So this is not anymore about data, it's actually about water governance and farming. And you might think of the Netherlands based on various reasons, but today I'm going to talk about water governance and farming. And as you can see here, we are very nicely tucked into our biggest markets, definitely contributing to the Netherlands being the second largest exporter of agricultural goods in the world. And it's a little bit of a pressure cooker. 17 million people living in 2/3 of Tasmania. And this picture shows you that water management has been and is very, very important. The blue depicts the area of the Netherlands that would be underwater if we did not manage the water as we do and build dikes. The dark blue on the picture with the lot of colors shows that our biggest cities are up to 12 meters under sea level. And the red, just to give you a little bit of a perspective, is 50 meters above sea level. So it's very, very flat. You can actually see that in the next picture as well. On one side you see horticulture, on the other side you see what we call broadacre. And Will just shared some of his, part of his farm of 260 hectares. That is 10 farms in the Netherlands. So we're talking about a very, very micromanaged system, both agriculture-wise, production-wise, but also water management-wise. And water management is, well, as it is here, very high on the political agenda. And that has been there since the 13th century. We have a long-term plan in the Netherlands to manage our water up to the 2100, and it's to protect against flooding and to secure fresh water availability in summer. There is a Delta fund of 1 billion a year available to actually do the investments needed to keep the current situation. And that's a bit the European perspective. And from a research kind of point of view, it's very interesting for me to be in a part of the world where both agriculture and water management is very much in a transition. And even more so where water has a price, where water has a dollar value, which is not the case in the Netherlands. So water governance in the Netherlands, and this is what I'm kind of slightly comparing this. It is collaboration at all levels, and consultation is something different than collaboration. And there is a lot of effort in bringing different parties, different backgrounds, different expertise, different knowledges together to better understand how we can better manage our water system. And the most important thing, especially if we talk about infrastructure, is to make non-regret decisions. So if we have a plan for how we want to manage the Netherlands for the next 100 years, and we don't know what the future brings, it's the most important thing to make non-regret decisions. And that brings me to my research objective here. I was very interested in how a water system works when you actually have a price on water. But I do not want to model or put in a model what the best price is, but I'm very interested in differences between farmers, in differences in perspectives, and reasons why a group of farmers not make the same investment decision if they all get the same kind of opportunity. And although Lynette Skinner doesn't know anything about agriculture, he understands that what is best for me might not be best for you. So I have that as an inspiration. So I did interviews, I organized workshops in the Core River Valley, and the workshops are focused on crossover points. Crossover points is just a method to encourage participants to explore and explain their reasoning. So it's not about right or wrong or objective truth finding, but it's about personal perspectives and personal reasoning that sit behind water preferences or willingness to pay for water. So why do two farmers, two neighbors, actually one will invest and the other will not invest if he or she gets the opportunity? And I do this to improve the understanding of where differences come from, but also to provide input in planning that depends on individual decision making. And that is the case if you go from dryland farming, put an irrigation scheme on it and go to an irrigated system. I'll share some results, and the results are mostly focused on what is actually meant with profit and what is meant with returns. And it turns out the participants of the workshop looked very, very differently at these two might at first hand look quite simple words, but they mean different things to different people. So one of my questions was, how much do you actually have to generate if you invest in water? So you buy a certain amount of water rights, how much do you have to generate to actually make that worthwhile? Well, some of the participants started reasoning in creating more value, marginal gains, but others said, well, actually, I do not have to create anything as long as I see this as an asset, and this asset will increase in value in the long term. So it's not a cost, it's actually an investment. But that some of the other participants completely did not agree with that, and their reasoning was not around it as an asset, but just to make a profit next year. So these are differences between participants. Another result is that not all benefits are visible. And I give an example around stress. Some were a lot more stressed because they had a big overhead and a debt because they invested in irrigation. And others says, I actually sleep better, I have less stress because I don't have to worry about the weather anymore. I know how much water I have, I know what I will grow, and I know when I can harvest. So this is also a personal perception that is invisible. It has to do with profits or benefits, but it's not a monetary factor. And then another result is that investing in irrigation is not solely based on making profits. A lot of participant reasons, and this is especially when it's intergenerational, if they get the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to invest in water, they want to create a farm that is future-proof. And if you want to create a farm that's future-proof, then short-term profits mean a lot less to you than when you do not have that very long-term point of view, which completely it has a big influence on participants' willingness to pay, on what kind of how long they see this, over what period they spread the cost of this investment. Another thing is that if there is an irrigation scheme in place, it seems that the demand for water goes up and the willingness to pay for this water goes up. And asking a dryland farmer whether he wants to become an irrigator, or she, is a question about changing lives. I have the analogy that you ask a carpenter to become a plumber and you have to buy the truck in advance. So it's not about doing things different, it's about doing different things, and that has an effect on you and your family in the short and in the long term. And these results kind of relate to some thoughts, is that there is a lot to learn from and with peers. And we talked a lot about data, but this is about perspectives. How do you look at what you're doing? Why do you do what you're doing? And to have a conversation like that, it's, at least for the participants in my workshop, was very valuable. And another thing is, and this has to do with water management and water governance, especially for a state perspective, you cannot predict under which conditions a group of farmers all invest in water. They all have very personal reasoning that determines their willingness to pay. And that's different and stays different within a group. So if you conclude that investments are based on current knowledge and understanding, what do I know now and where do I see, how do I look at the future, then there is, from a governance perspective, two kind of lessons to learn. Is how can you increase current knowledge? How can you help farmers understand the decision making that is involved in going from a dryland cropper into an irrigator? And I think there's a lot to learn with farm-to-farmer learning. And the last one is, if you know that knowledge and understanding will change in the future, and with that demand and willingness to pay, then how do you make non-regret irrigation scheme design decisions? And I'll leave you with that, but now Mace will introduce his master thesis.